Alex shot at the white tail as it desperately charged into the underbrush, not even knowing if it was a doe or a buck. The meat was just as good. The thrill of the hunt was the same. The oddly syncopated gait told him the arrow had definitely struck, though he hadn't gotten the heart. He quickly shimmied down the stand and went to the spot where he'd hit the deer to check the trail. A few drops of red in the snow confirmed the hit. Ahead on the trail, the drops got larger, then veered off in the trail into a crash of branches. Had the deer lost enough blood to collapse, or had it lost its footing trying to run on the injured limb? He jogged down the trail and easily spotted the break in the undergrowth where the deer had crashed through. Smears of blood on a scatter of fallen branches proved its course, but it didn't look like enough for the deer to bleed out. Much as he enjoyed bow hunting, he wasn't cruel enough to leave it to a lingering death. He drew another broadhead and knocked it, ready to draw. If the deer could still run, he wouldn't have much time to aim. He started to pick his way through the undergrowth, then he heard a large mass fall to the ground ahead. His deer? The brush thinned into a not quite clearing where he could spot a patch of brown moving. Either it was a very tall deer or it was standing on a higher patch of ground. It turned and gave a low moan. Oh shit! There was a grizzly on his kill, and he was upwind. The bear turned and started to advance. He instinctively loosed his arrow at its chest and ducked behind the nearest tree, automatically drawing another from his quiver and knocking it by touch. The bear didn't appreciate getting shot and roared its displeasure. His arrow had struck in the right shoulder, causing the bear to turn slightly away from him to favor the injured side. Alex had heard of bears taking 5 or 6 bullets without stopping. Even if his aim was true, a single arrow might not penetrate to the heart, so he shifted his target, putting the next one in its left eye. Now the bear really roared, standing up on its hind legs in an attempt to protect its face from the claws of this annoying two-legged creature. Alex managed to draw and loose another arrow into its neck before it came down. Hoping it had gone into the jugular, or at least the trachea, but not daring to pause long enough to find out, he took advantage of being on its now blind side and tried to move behind it and get downwind. But the bear heard him and spun about surprisingly fast to bring Alex into view of its uninjured eye. He loosed 2 more arrows without really aiming, still trying to circle to its blind side while groping at the quiver for another arrow, not even sure how many he had left. The bear pawed at its forehead, where one arrow had apparently caught in the fur without doing any real damage. It dropped to the ground as Alex found and knocked another arrow, this time aiming for the right eye, but the bear turned again and he heard the arrow thunk into a tree. The bear came at Alex again, but its injured shoulder gave out, spoiling its charge enough for Alex to again dash aside. He groped for another arrow, then dared to look at his quiver. 1 arrow. He grabbed it. Damn, it was only a target tip. How had it gotten mixed in with his broadheads? He grabbed the arrow in his mouth and slipped the bow up his arm so he could grab the branches of a fir near a maple with a good-sized limb. Using the fir as a ladder, he scrambled up to the branch and along it to the trunk. It gave him a height advantage, but the bear could still reach him. Luckily, the bear's injured shoulder was finally slowing it down. It sniffed around the fir, trying to discern where he'd gone. Bracing against the trunk and a smaller branch, Alex had a precious second or two to line up the shot. With only a target tip, about the only thing he could aim for was the other eye. The bear started to turn toward him again. He saw his shot. Just as he loosed, the bear raised a paw toward him, and the arrow was suddenly in its paw. Oh, this was beyond bad words. Either the arrow had somehow managed to penetrate flesh, or it had wedged between its paws. The bear had momentarily stopped its charge to chew at the arrow. He spotted the fallen broadhead. What now? Try to climb higher into the tree or go after the broadhead? Though the branch he was standing on supported his weight, the one he was leaning against wouldn't, and he wasn't sure if he'd be able to reach the next one. A sharp snap drew his attention back to the bear. It had broken the arrow, and it had figured out where he was. It charged at the tree and started to rear toward him. Using the smaller branch as a trapeze, he swung over its head, bouncing off his back on his way down and making a mad dive for the broadhead. Not bothering to get up, he rolled over, knocked, and loosed as the bear turned for him again. Nearly on top of him, the bear reared again as the broadhead sank into its neck, then came down, one paw narrowly missing Alex's head. Showered with blood, Alex rolled away, then got up. The bear, now wheezing, turned to him again, but there was no speed in its movements anymore. Alex dropped the bow and reached for his folder. The bear limped toward him as he unfolded the knife. Though it could conceivably survive, its wounds would make it easy prey for anything else that might come along. He waited for an opening, then rushed in and drew the knife across the throat, finishing the job the arrow had started. The bear drunkenly staggered a few more steps, then collapsed with a weakening moan. "I'm sorry," he told it. "I didn't mean for you to be my prey." Not sure if the bear was still reactive, he went over to the deer and started to field dress it. His own movements slowed nearly as much as the bear's by the adrenaline drain. He'd nearly completed the belly cut when he heard a soft moan. Now what? He slowly got up and looked toward the sound, which was joined by a second moan. By the time the little muzzles peeked out from the bushes, he knew exactly what belonged to the moans. Why else would the bear have been so aggressive? He kept an ear on them. It sounded like they were going to their mother. Well, he pulled the guts out and laid them near the bushes where he'd spotted them, then added a few leg cuts too. Then he went back to the bear. There were two, and they looked scrawny. They nuzzled their mother's face, bewildered that she wasn't getting up or giving them any affections. When they noticed Alice, they froze, uncertain whether to run off or try to defend their mother. Alex went back to the pile he'd made for them and cut a few fingers of meat off. Returning to the bear, he patiently sat near her head and held the meat out. After several minutes, the bolder cub tentatively came close enough to take one, and then a second. Emboldened by its sibling, the second timidly approached enough to snatch a sliver and retreat. He coaxed them over to the pile he'd made for them. "Here you go, kids. Sorry about your mom."